When Toshiro Hitsugaya transformed into his adult form, we all collectively lost our minds. The young prodigy captain was finally showcasing his true potential. In this new form, ice covers his shoulders, forearms, and knees. His height grows taller as he now has this imposing demeanor, and he has those devastating abilities that froze Gerard's sword mid-swing and nullified its powers entirely. Despite how incredibly cool and overpowered this transformation was, can you guess what Hitsugaya's first comments about this form were? He states that he doesn't really like it that much. In chapter 670, Hitsugaya finally reveals his adult form, but he basically shrugs it off by saying, yeah, I don't really care for this. And meanwhile, Rukia and Renji show up and mistake Hitsugaya for his own older brother. And he basically goes along with it because apparently that's easier than explaining what has actually happened. Now here's the thing, Hitsugaya's distaste for his adult form isn't just some throwaway character quirk that Kubo has added for laughs. When you actually dig into what this form represents, how it functions, and what it costs him, his attitude makes perfect sense. In fact, I'd argue it's one of the most honest character moments within the Thousand-Year Blood War arc. Let's begin by understanding what this adult form actually is, because there's been some confusion about this since the manga chapter had released. Hitsugaya's adult appearance isn't some separate transformation or a different technique. It's what happens when Daiguren Hyorinmaru reaches its completed state. Those 12 ice petals that appear behind him in his Bankai state, they're not just decorations, they are a countdown. For years, we and apparently even other captains like Byakuya had assumed that those petals shattering meant that Hitsugaya's Bankai was running out of time. Xiaolong Kufang theorized this during their fight in the Arrancar arc, suggesting that the Bankai was incomplete because of Hitsugaya's young age. Well, it turns out Xiaolong was half right. The Bankai was incomplete, but the petals weren't counting down to the failure of the Bankai, they were counting down to the completion of it. In chapter 538, following the Fullbring arc, Hitsugaya explicitly states that he spent those 17 months training Hyorinmaru to what he calls a true Bankai state. In essence, he had completed Daiguren Hyorinmaru, but even after all of that training, he still activated the same ice covering form that we saw against Haribel. He still has the wings, the tail, and the dragon motifs. So what exactly changed? Kubo answered this in Club Outside question and answer 226. Before Hitsugaya mastered his Bankai, if those petals had all shattered, it wouldn't have triggered some awesome transformation, it would have severely injured him. As a fan asked Kubo what happens when all of Hitsugaya's petals fall away during the period when he had an imperfect Bankai. So this is prior to those 17 months of training. Kubo clearly states Hitsugaya would injure himself if he were to let all of the petals fall with his imperfect Bankai. So no, it wouldn't have triggered some incredibly awesome transformation, it would have injured him. The Bankai would have damaged its own wielder because his body and power wasn't synchronized yet. Those 17 months of training weren't about unlocking a new form, it was about making sure his Bankai wouldn't kill him when it reached full power. Hitsugaya's adult form represents the ceiling of what Daiguren Hyorinmaru can actually do. It is Hitsugaya's future, when he's naturally this age, and given how slowly Shinigami age, that could be centuries from now, but this is the baseline power that he'll wield. His Zanpakuto literally forces his body to age up because his current physical form is that of a child. It cannot contain or properly channel this level of spiritual power, pretty much similar to how Gon had transformed into his Berserker adult form against Pito. Believe it or not, Kubo planted the seeds for this reveal way back during the Arrancar arc, but not many people had caught it at the time. In chapter 359, during the battle against Haribel, Hitsugaya mentions that he dislikes using Tenso Juren, his ability in his Bankai state to control weather, and this is because he hasn't fully mastered it yet. His concerns are centered around him accidentally harming his allies because the power is beyond his complete control. Hitsugaya is the youngest captain within the history of the Gotei 13. He's a prodigy who achieved Bankai faster than anyone, but it was still fundamentally incomplete. His power exceeded his ability to control it, and that gap between potential and mastery becomes the entire point of his character arc. After Aizen's defeat, Hitsugaya does something that separates him from almost every other character in Bleach. He admits his weakness and actively works to fix it. Chapter 423 shows him training alone in a cave, pushing himself to develop finer control over Hyorinmaru, not bigger attacks, not flashier techniques, but he's trying to master his Zanpakuto. He's doing this because he couldn't protect Momo, because Aizen manipulated him into stabbing her during the fake Karakura Town arc. For all of the talent and potential that he has, it wasn't good enough when it mattered. Hitsugaya's training pays off during the Fullbringer arc when he easily handles Yukio, but the real test comes during the 1000-year Blood War arc, and that's when everything starts to fall apart. Kangdu steals Daiguren Hyorinmaru during the first Quincy invasion, and this moment breaks something in Hitsugaya that we don't see in other captains who lost their Bankai. Byakuya gets mortally wounded and comes back stronger thanks to his Royal Guard training. Komamura gains the humanization technique via his grandfather, and Soifon, well, she gets her Bankai back and that's about it, but at least she's constantly portrayed as powerful. Hitsugaya, he goes back to basics. Chapter 538 shows him at a training dojo relearning fundamental Zanjutsu from the Shinigami Academy instructors. The youngest captain in history is swallowing his pride and asking to be retrained in swordsmanship like a student, and his internal monologue here is crucial. He says, "I can't lament over losing my Bankai, I must move forward." This is who Hitsugaya is. He doesn't wait for his power to return. He doesn't sulk about what he's lost. He adapts and grows. He finds a way to contribute without relying on his greatest strength. During the second invasion, we see him team up with Rangiku to create vacuum ice blades using Haineko's ash. They develop the multi-layer vacuum ice wall technique on the fly, as Hitsugaya builds interwoven ice walls generating fields of icy mist, and he lays freezing traps with the 6-point ice formation technique. He's fighting smarter because he can't fight any harder than this. Despite all of these innovations and adaptations to his fighting style, Bazz-B still demolishes Hitsugaya. He punches a hole clean through his torso with Burner Finger 2. Hitsugaya tries every trick in the book, every strategy that he's developed, but it doesn't matter. He really needed his Bankai here. When Urahara's shadow infiltration pills return the stolen Bankai to their respective owners and Hitsugaya gets Daiguren Hyorinmaru back, it appears to take on an all-new amazing holified appearance. He uses his holified Bankai to defeat Kangdu in essentially one move, freezing him solid before the Sternritter can react. It was almost too easy, so this raises the questions that nobody really answers. Was Kangdu weak? Was the holified Bankai that strong? Or was Hitsugaya just fighting with nothing held back for once? Fast forward to when everybody appears within the royal palace and Hitsugaya is facing off against Gerard Valkyrie alongside Byakuya and Kinpachi. Gerard is absurdly powerful. He's tanking hits from Kinpachi's Shikai, regenerating from fatal wounds, growing larger and stronger with each attack. The miracle turns every setback that he receives into an advantage for him, making him effectively unkillable through conventional means. Hitsugaya is getting tossed around, but he's also doing something none of the other captains can manage. He's thinking about collateral damage. When Gerard's massive body threatens to fall on the Serete below, Hitsugaya freezes the falling chunks of Waharvelt in place as he's fighting Gerard and trying to protect everyone below the royal palace at the same time. This is a signature trait of Hitsugaya's, that sense of responsibility. That's what makes him captain material despite his young age. Gerard keeps getting stronger throughout the fight. Kinpachi removes his eye patch and still can't put him down permanently. Byakuya's Zenbonzakura Kageyoshi fails to end the fight, and they're at their limits and everyone knows it, and that's when the final petal shatters. Hitsugaya tells Byakuya that he never said the Bankai ended when the petals were gone. He explains that his power wasn't mature enough to use the Bankai to its fullest potential, and he needs to age to use it properly, and then he transforms into his adult form, as we finally get our first glimpse of the completed Daiguren Hyorinmaru. The abilities that Hitsugaya demonstrates are genuinely broken. He flash freezes Gerard's shield mid-flight with just a hand gesture. He even cuts through Hoffnung, Gerard's sword that reflects damage back onto his opponents. And because the sword is frozen, its ability doesn't work anymore. Power nullification through freezing is a key ability in the completed form of Daiguren Hyorinmaru. He activates Shikai Hyoketsu 2, which freezes all matter in front of him within 4 4 seconds by freezing the 4 elements of earth, fire, water, and wind. When Gerard grabs him, the Quincy's hand flash freezes on contact because touching adult form Hitsugaya means instant freezing. This is a totally different tier of power. The speed of his freezing goes from fast to instantaneous, and the area of effect goes from large area to everything. And not to forget the completely hacks broken ability to nullify everything that he freezes. The reason why Hitsugaya doesn't like this form is because of a combination of factors that all point to the same conclusion. This form represents everything Hitsugaya has worked his entire life to overcome. The first issue is the physical toll of the adult form. In chapter 672, immediately after they appear to have defeated Gerard, Hitsugaya collapses. Byakuya catches him and notes that the completed Bankai pushed his body to the brink. Hitsugaya admits that he's almost at his limit. He was in that form for maybe 5 minutes of real combat time, and he's completely exhausted. Compare that to his incomplete Bankai, which he can maintain for extended periods even while injured. The stamina drain isn't just a minor inconvenience. It's a major flaw in the design of the adult form. Hitsugaya's child body is being forcibly aged to handle power it's not ready for. That's not a sustainable transformation. His Zanpakuto is basically saying your body isn't good enough, so I'm temporarily upgrading it, and the biological stress of that forced aging is going to be immense. Second, there's the activation condition of the adult form. Hitsugaya can't just choose to go into it when he wants. He has to wait for all 12 petals to shatter, which means spending time in his incomplete Bankai form first. Against an enemy like Gerard who keeps getting stronger, that delay matters. If he could access the adult form immediately, maybe they defeat Gerard before the miracle makes him too powerful, but Hitsugaya simply cannot. He has to fight at a disadvantage first, waiting for his power to catch up to where it needs to be. This is the opposite of how other captains' Bankai work. Byakuya can activate Zenmonzakura Kageyoshi and immediately use Ika Senjinka. Kenpachi can release his Bankai and instantly access its full power. Hitsugaya has to go through a timed activation sequence where he's literally counting down petals while fighting for his life. Now, the third and potentially biggest limitation of the adult form is a constant reminder that Hitsugaya isn't there yet. He's not actually this strong. This isn't his power at this point in time. It's borrowed from his future self. Every time he transforms, he's admitting that despite all of his training, despite mastering his Bankai, despite becoming the youngest captain in history, his current self isn't enough. Hitsugaya's entire character is built around being taken seriously despite his age. He insists people call him Captain Hitsugaya, not Hitsugaya-kun or Shiro-chan. He hates being underestimated because of his height. He works twice as hard as everyone else to prove that he deserves his rank, and then his Bankai literally says, "You need to be older to use my real power," and that has honestly got to sting. When Rukia and Renji see adult Hitsugaya, they think that he's someone else entirely. They're responding to the truth. This isn't the Hitsugaya that they know. And Hitsugaya just goes along with it. Yes, I am an older brother. He doesn't correct them or explain, he lets them believe that he's someone else because in a way he is. This is a future version of himself that he frankly hasn't earned yet. Hitsugaya has spent his entire life trying to be respected as he is, not for what he might become. Hitsugaya's greatest power when it's revealed is only accessible by literally not being himself anymore. And as a character, Hitsugaya strikes me as someone who values authenticity, who wants to win as himself, not as some temporary version of his future self. From a practical standpoint, the adult form also has some serious problems beyond just the stamina drain and activation delay. The biggest issue is predictability. Any opponent who's done their homework about how the ice petals work know that they can either beat Hitsugaya before the petals shatter or outlast his adult form after they do shatter. There is also the question of control. Hitsugaya's whole thing with Tensou Jurin was that he couldn't fully control it in Bankai because the power was too much for him. Does that problem go away in his adult form? You can assume that it does since his body is temporarily capable of handling the power, but we don't actually see him use Tensou Jurin in his adult form, so we don't know for sure. And if he's still holding back certain techniques because he's not confident in his control, that is also a problem. The adult form also doesn't seem to grant any enhanced durability or healing beyond what his incomplete Bankai offers. Gerard grabs him, and while the freezing effect protects him, he he's still being physically restrained and needs to be rescued? If his body is forcibly aged to handle the power, why isn't it more durable? Why can Gerard's grip still threaten him? The transformation seems to boost his offensive capabilities into the stratosphere while leaving his defensive options unchanged. Again, aside from that freezing effect that he has when anyone touches him, the real reason why Hitsugaya doesn't like his adult form is because it's a crutch, and Hitsugaya isn't someone who likes relying on crutches. Look at his response to losing his Bankai in the first invasion. He doesn't complain or demand Urahara find an immediate solution. Instead, he goes back to basics and learns how to fight without it. Contrast this to his adult form, which comes along and says, actually, you need this massive power boost to win. All of that adaptation, all of that growth, all of those creative strategies, none of them matter. You need it to wait for the petals to fall and the real power is going to show up. I think this bothers Hitsugaya more than he'd ever like to admit. He wants to be strong as himself, not as some future version of himself. He wants to win through skill and training and mastery, not through a hack's broken transformation that he can't even control the timing of. The adult form is undeniably powerful and cool, but it represents a fundamental failure to be strong enough as he currently is. In the end, Hitsugaya's dislike of his adult form comes down to a fundamental truth about his character. He wants to be judged on who he is now, not who he'll be later. We have now reached the point of the video where I want to hand over the discussion to all of you. What are your thoughts about the completed Daiguren Hyorinmaru transformation? Do you love Hitsugaya's adult form as much as I do? And has this video helped you to better understand why Hitsugaya doesn't like this transformation? If there's anything that I've forgotten to mention about Hitsugaya's adult form, then let me know by continuing the discussion in the comments. And lastly, thanks for making it to the end of this one, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video.
A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.